He threw the pen across the mahogany table, laughing as the ink from the divorce papers bled into the wood grain. Finally, he sneered, looking at the woman who had cooked his meals, ironed his shirts, and carried him through 3 years of his ambition. Free of your mediocrity. He thought he was discarding dead weight on his way to a fortune. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, because he had never bothered to look, was that the woman sitting quietly across from him wasn't just a housewife. She was the sole heir to the Blackwood sovereignty, a private equity empire worth more than the GDP of a small country. And that signature he was so eager to get had just cost him everything. The conference room on the 36th floor of Lamb and Watkins on 6th Avenue was cold. The kind of cold that comes from aggressive air conditioning and the frosty silence between two people sitting at a long glass table. Outside, New York City was a gray blur of rain and traffic. Inside, Ethan Caldwell felt like he was standing in the sun. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke suit, a gift from Leah, his new partner in both business and pleasure, and looked at the woman sitting opposite him. Sarah. Plain. That was the word Ethan always used in his head when he thought about her. Plain. She wore a beige cardigan that had seen better days, brown hair pulled back in a loose bun. No makeup, no jewelry except for the simple gold band on her finger, the one he was about to make her take off. "Are you going to stare at it all day?" Ethan said, his voice sharp and impatient. "Or are you going to sign so we can both get on with our lives? Or, well, so I can get on with mine." Sarah looked down at the document. Decree of absolute divorce. "You're sure this is what you want, Ethan?" Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. Not pleading, strangely calm, a kind of stillness Ethan mistook for defeat. He scoffed and leaned back in the expensive leather chair. "Sarah, let's be real. Look at you. Then look at where I'm going. I just made senior VP at Sterling Hess. I'm closing deals with tech giants. I need a partner who fits that world. Someone who can host a gala, not someone who panics about the price of organic eggs." He saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Amusement? No, had to be sadness. "I supported you when you were an unpaid intern," Sarah said, her finger tracing the edge of the papers. "I paid the rent in that basement in Queens. I bought your first suit." "And I paid you back," Ethan snapped, slamming his palm on the table. "You got the alimony check, $50,000. Take it and open a bakery or whatever it is women like you dream about. But stop pretending we're equals. You were a stepping stone, Sarah. A comfortable, boring stepping stone." His phone buzzed. A text from Leah Monroe. "Has the deadweight signed yet? Reservation at Leonard is at 8. Don't be late. I have news about the Obsidian deal." Ethan smiled at the screen. Leah was everything Sarah wasn't. Fierce, ambitious, the daughter of a real estate mogul, the kind of woman who wore Louboutins to breakfast. "Sign the papers, Sarah," he said, his voice dropping to a cruel register. "Do it, and I'll even let you keep the Honda." Sarah picked up the pen. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply uncapped the cheap ballpoint and wrote her name in a fluid, elegant script. Sarah Winslow. She pushed the papers across the table and stood up. She looked taller suddenly. The beige cardigan didn't look like a rag anymore. It looked like a costume she was tired of wearing. "You're free, Ethan," she said. "You wanted a life without mediocrity. You have it." He grabbed the papers like a winning lottery ticket and was already texting Leah before Sarah reached the door. He didn't watch her leave. If he had, he would have seen something extraordinary. The moment Sarah stepped out of the skyscraper and onto the rain-soaked sidewalk of 6th Avenue, 3 blacked-out Cadillac Escalades with diplomatic plates screeched to a halt at the curb. Pedestrians stopped and stared. A man in a sharp charcoal suit, Jameson, the Winslow family's head of security for 30 years, stepped out of the lead car and held an umbrella over her head. "Ms. Winslow," he said, bowing slightly. "Your father has been waiting for the call. Is it done?" Sarah pulled the hair tie from her bun and let chestnut waves fall down her back. She dropped the beige cardigan into a nearby trash can. Underneath it was a simple white silk blouse that probably cost more than Ethan's car. "It's done, Jameson," she said, her voice turning to steel. Ethan Caldwell is no longer my husband. Initiate Protocol 0. She slid into the leather back seat. Take me to the airstrip. The Gulf Stream is waiting. We have a board meeting in London tomorrow, and I need to explain to the shareholders why I'm about to acquire Sterling Hess and dismantle it piece by piece. 2 weeks passed. For Ethan, they were the best 2 weeks of his life. He stood on the balcony of Leah Monroe's penthouse on the Upper East Side, overlooking Central Park, holding an 18-year-old Macallan in one hand and a Cuban cigar in the other. Leah wrapped her arms around him from behind, diamonds glittering at her throat. "You look like a king," she purred. "I feel like one," Ethan admitted. "Divorcing Sarah was the best business decision I ever made." Leah agreed and called Sarah a goldfish who had been holding him back from being the shark he was always meant to be. They laughed about it. Then Ethan turned the conversation to the Obsidian Group, the white whale of the financial world. A private equity firm so exclusive it had no public website, so wealthy it didn't recruit, it chose. Rumor had it they controlled major stakes in everything from aerospace to pharmaceuticals. And word was that the reclusive CEO was coming to New York tonight for the Meridian Charity Gala. If he could land the account for Sterling Hess, Ethan told Leah, he wouldn't just be a VP, he'd be a partner. He'd be on the cover of Forbes. Leah smiled and told him her father had pulled strings to get them the best table in the room, right next to the Obsidian representatives. Ethan had never felt more certain of his trajectory. The Meridian Gala at the Plaza Hotel was a sea of velvet, silk, and old money. Camera flashes popped like strobe lights as New York's elite filed in. Ethan walked in with Leah on his arm, feeling, for the last time, like he had arrived. His boss, Arthur Sterling, met him near the bar, leaning in to mention that the Winslow heiress herself might make an appearance. Ethan frowned. He thought the Winslow family had died out. Arthur shook his head. Old man Winslow had a daughter. Kept her hidden, sent her to boarding schools in Switzerland, then she'd reportedly vanished for a few years to live a normal life before taking over. Ethan laughed. "Sounds like a waste of time," he said. "Who would want to be poor?" "Exactly," Leah chimed in. "Real power is meant to be flaunted." A hush fell over the room. It started at the entrance and swept through the crowd like a wave. The music stopped. The chatter died. The massive double doors at the top of the grand staircase swung open. A woman stepped through them, wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet, embroidered with crushed diamonds that caught the light with every movement. Around her neck was the Star of Savoy, a sapphire necklace last seen in the Italian royal court in the 1920s. Her hair was set in glamorous Hollywood waves, her makeup sharp and precise, accentuating high cheekbones and piercing green eyes. She looked powerful. She looked dangerous. She looked like a queen surveying her kingdom. Ethan dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing in the silence. "That's," Leah whispered, clutching his arm. "That's Sarah Winslow." Ethan couldn't breathe. His brain was misfiring, trying to reconcile two impossible images. The woman in the midnight blue gown, radiating billions of dollars of influence, and the woman in the beige cardigan he'd told to keep the Honda. It was Sarah, but it wasn't his Sarah. This woman held her head high, her gaze sweeping the room with cold indifference as she descended the staircase, flanked by 4 security guards. The crowd parted for her. Arthur Sterling turned to Ethan, his face pale. "Ethan," he said, his voice trembling with sudden, terrifying recognition. "You divorced Sarah Winslow? She owns the Obsidian Group. She literally owns the building we're standing in right now." Sarah reached the bottom of the stairs. A waiter offered champagne. She took it. For the first time, her eyes locked onto Ethan's. She didn't look angry. She didn't look sad. She smiled. It was the same smile she had given him when she signed the papers. A smile that said, "You have no idea what you've done." She walked directly toward them. Leah, usually so formidably confident, actually stepped back as the sheer magnitude of Sarah's presence hit her. "Good evening, Arthur," Sarah said smoothly, ignoring Ethan entirely. Arthur stammered a greeting, sweating visibly. Sarah sipped her champagne, and said she'd never left New York. She'd merely been observing, conducting a field study on the integrity of the modern man. Then she finally turned her gaze to Ethan. She looked him up and down with something close to mild distaste. "Hello, Ethan." He choked out her name. She raised a hand. "Please, Sarah was the woman who cooked your pot roast. She doesn't exist anymore." "You signed her away." She stepped close enough that only he and Leah could hear. "I hope you enjoyed the last 2 weeks because I just bought Sterling Hess this morning, which means—" She paused, green eyes sparkling with quiet malice. "I'm your boss, and we need to have a very serious performance review." She patted his cheek. "Don't be late tomorrow. I hate tardiness." Then she turned and walked away, the train of her gown flowing behind her like liquid night, leaving Ethan standing in the shattered glass of his own life. The next morning, Ethan swiped his badge at the turnstile of the Sterling Hess building and got a red light. Access denied. He tried again. Then Jameson appeared behind the security desk beside a cardboard box. Ethan's personal effects collected from his office. "Your new workspace has been prepared," Jameson said. "Not the executive elevator, the service lift. Not the penthouse suite on the 40th floor, the 4th floor. A windowless room of gray cubicles and fluorescent lights that hummed like dying flies, where Ethan was installed at an open desk, exposed on all sides, and handed 5 years of his own expense reports for manual cross-referencing. When he protested, Sarah appeared in the doorway in a razor-sharp white power suit, her hair severe and immaculate. She told him he had 2 options. Option A, quit right now, and she'd release the audit file to every recruitment agency in New York, detailing his gross negligence. He'd never work in finance again. Option B, stay, sit at this desk, do the work he'd always considered beneath him, and prove he was actually worth the air he breathed. "Why?" he whispered. "Why keep me here?" Sarah leaned in close, smelling of expensive jasmine and cold, hard cash. "Because I want to watch you realize that without me, you are nothing. I carried you for 3 years. Now you're going to learn how heavy the world really is." By 6 in the evening, Ethan's eyes were burning from spreadsheets. He had been ignored by 22-year-old interns who knew exactly who he was and enjoyed every second of his downfall. He left exhausted and hailed a taxi to Leia's penthouse. The doorman blocked his path. Miss Monroe had left strict instructions. He wasn't on the list. His 3 Louis Vuitton suitcases were already sitting in the lobby. He dialed Leah. She picked up eventually, her voice icy and stripped of its usual warmth. She told him he hadn't mentioned his ex-wife was Sarah Winslow. Her family had enormous exposure to the Obsidian Group. If Sarah chose to call in her father's loans, the Monroe family would be ruined. She couldn't be seen with him. He was radioactive. "I'm the same man I was yesterday," Ethan shouted. "No," Leah said. "I'm powerful. You were just an accessory, and you're out of style." The line went dead. He was essentially homeless. He'd put his apartment on the market in anticipation of moving in with Leah, and it was now staged with rental furniture and no electricity. He dragged his suitcases to the nearest hotel and slapped his platinum Amex on the counter. Declined. His debit card. Declined. His backup Visa. Declined. He opened his banking app. Balance 0. Account frozen. Court order pending. He sat down on one of his suitcases in the lobby and stared at the television screen behind the reception desk. A business channel was reporting breaking news. The Obsidian Group had announced the acquisition of Sterling Hess. New CEO Sarah Winslow had vowed to clean up corporate corruption and embezzlement. Standing beside her at the press conference was a tall, striking man with salt and pepper hair, Nathaniel Roth, the only lawyer in New York said to have never lost a case. The receptionist mentioned, without prompting, that rumor had them engaged. On screen, Sarah looked into the camera and announced they had found significant financial irregularities related to one specific executive. They had frozen his assets pending federal investigation. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. She hadn't just fired him, she was exposing every corner he had cut, Every gray area he'd exploited, assuming no one would ever look. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. A text. "You told me to keep the Honda. I hope you kept the spare key. It's parked on 42nd Street. It's the only asset in your name not currently seized by the IRS. Drive safe. S." He ran through the rain until he found it. The dented gray Honda Civic. The car he had refused to be seen in. He threw himself into the driver's seat, soaking wet and shivering. The engine sputtered but caught. The heater blasted air that smelled of stale French fries and the vanilla air freshener Sarah used to like. Ethan Caldwell, the man who thought he was a king, gripped the steering wheel and screamed into the empty car. He had nowhere to go, no money for gas, no one who would pick up the phone. And somewhere across the street, he knew, she was watching. From the shadow of an alleyway, a black Cadillac sat idling. Inside, Sarah watched him bang his fists on the wheel. "Shall we intervene, ma'am?" Jameson asked. "No," Sarah said quietly. "Let him sit in it. He needs to understand that rock bottom has a basement." She turned to Nathaniel Roth, who was reviewing a legal brief on a tablet beside her. "Is the forensic audit ready for phase 2? He looked up with a wolfish grin. "It is. We found the offshore accounts he tried to hide during the marriage. Turns out he was concealing money while you were paying his rent. That's perjury. We can put him away." Sarah looked back at the Honda. "Prison is too easy," she said softly. "I don't want him behind bars. I want him to owe me. I want him to spend the next 10 years working off his debt, knowing that every bite of food he eats exists because I allowed it." She tapped the window. "Drive." With no other options, Ethan drove to New Jersey, to Sunnyvale Estates, a depressing grid of aluminum siding and gravel driveways. His mother Martha's trailer, Lot 42. He hadn't been there in 5 years. He hadn't invited her to his wedding. He'd told colleagues she was traveling in Europe when she was working double shifts at a diner. When he knocked, she opened the door in a flannel robe, cigarette dangling. She looked older, harder. She looked him up and down, soaked suit, mud on his Italian shoes, desperation in his eyes. "Did your GPS break?" she said. "Or did you just run out of people to impress?" He told her he'd messed up. She didn't hug him. She stepped aside. "Couch is lumpy," she said. "Don't wake me before noon." The next morning, a sleek silver Bentley was navigating the potholes of the trailer park like a spaceship landing in a junkyard. Nathaniel Roth stepped out in a navy suit that cost more than the entire lot and knocked on the door. He told Ethan the forensic audit had found $4.2 million in payments approved under his name to a consulting firm called Apex Solutions, a firm that didn't exist, registered to a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. Ethan said Leah had told him it was a legitimate tax workaround for the Sterling account. He hadn't known it was a ghost company. Nathaniel told him plainly that ignorance wasn't a defense in federal court. Embezzlement, fraud, money laundering, 15 to 20 years in a federal penitentiary. But Sarah, Nathaniel explained, was a benevolent woman who didn't want her ex-husband to rot in a cell. It looked bad for the brand, so she was offering a private deal. Ethan owed the company $4.2 million. He would work it off. He would perform community service and general labor for the Winslow Foundation. His wages would be garnished at 100% until the debt was paid. In exchange, the FBI file stayed in the drawer. Sarah was hosting a charity gala in the Hamptons the following Saturday and was short on catering staff. Ethan should get fitted for a vest. The hourly rate was minimum wage. He had a lot of hours ahead of him. The Winslow estate in the Hamptons was not a house. It was a compound. White stone overlooking the Atlantic, manicured hedges, security guards with earpieces. Ethan stood in the service kitchen in a polyester waiter's uniform, adjusting a bow tie that felt like a noose. He grabbed a tray of champagne flutes and pushed through the swinging doors into a party full of former clients, college rivals, and people he had once impressed. He kept his head down. Former golf partners took champagne from him without recognizing his face. He was furniture to them, invisible. Then he made his way toward the VIP section and stopped cold. Leah Monroe was draped on the arm of Victor Cray, a Russian tech billionaire, laughing loudly in emerald green. Ethan tried to turn back, but a guest bumped into him, and a single glass tipped off the tray and splashed onto Victor's custom Armani jacket. The music stopped. Victor roared. The terrace went silent. Leia turned with irritation on her face, and then she saw who the waiter was. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. She announced to the crowd that the clumsy waiter who had just ruined Victor's jacket was her ex, the rising star of Wall Street, apparently at rock bottom. She performed for the crowd with everything she had, calling him a loser, a fraud, the easiest mark she had ever run. Ethan told her through clenched teeth that she had set him up with the Apex account. She laughed and said nobody had forced him to sign the checks. He'd been so desperate to impress her, so desperate to be someone, that he hadn't even read the fine print. He was the perfect patsy. Then a voice cut through the noise, soft but carrying the weight of a gavel. Sarah Winslow stepped out of the shadows in a black tuxedo suit, Nathaniel and 2 guards beside her. She walked calmly to Ethan, who was on his knees picking up shattered glass, and looked down at him for a moment. He braced for another blow. Instead, she turned to Leia. "Miss Monroe," Sarah said, "I believe you dropped something." Jameson stepped forward and handed Leia a folder. Inside was a transcript of a conversation recorded in Leia's penthouse 3 months ago. Leia and her father discussing how to use Ethan's signature to siphon funds from Sterling Hess into their failing real estate ventures. Leia protested that recording her was illegal. Sarah told her she had bought the building. She owned the security system, the servers, and the data. She then turned to Victor Cray and suggested he reconsider his companion, whose plans for the evening reportedly included pitching him a revolutionary crypto investment that was, in fact, a Ponzi scheme. Victor pulled his arm back from Leia as though she were contagious. Sarah told Leia to leave, that the evidence had already gone to the district attorney, and that she imagined trading the emerald dress for an orange jumpsuit was only a matter of time. Leia fled the party in tears. Sarah looked back at Ethan, still on his knees among the broken glass. She told him to stand up. He stood. He asked why she'd done it. She hated him. She said she didn't hate him. Hate required energy she preferred to spend elsewhere. She pitied him. He had been a blind fool who thought he was a visionary. She gestured to the mess on the floor and told him to clean it up, then meet her in the library to discuss the terms of his debt. The principal amount had changed. When he asked how, she said that helping her catch Leia Monroe was worth a credit. But he wasn't off the hook. He wasn't a waiter anymore. She had a new job for him. What job? She paused at the door and looked back over her shoulder. Her personal assistant. If he wanted to survive in her world, he was going to learn from the master. Be in her office at 6 in the morning, and for the love of everything, burn the polyester suit. 6 months later, at 2 in the morning on the 90th floor of the Obsidian Tower, Ethan stood at the espresso machine, timing the extraction to the second. The crema had to be exact. Sarah's preference, learned not by instruction but by observation, the same way she had once learned everything about him. The Ethan Caldwell who had worn bespoke suits and bragged about deals he didn't understand was gone. This man was thinner, harder, and sharper than he had ever been in his life. Dark circles were a permanent fixture, the badge of 6 months as Sarah Winslow's personal shadow. He wore a functional, off-the-rack suit, and for the first time in his life, he was genuinely competent. He placed the coffee on her desk at exactly the right angle, exactly the right distance from her laptop. Sarah told him the Bolivian Ministry of Energy had just sent revised terms and was stalling. He named Richard Croft before she finished the sentence, the only player with motive to interfere at this stage. She looked at him with something new in her eyes. He explained he'd already moved the liquid reserves from the Cayman holding accounts to escrow in Zurich that morning, anticipating the stall. The funds were ready the moment the La Paz market opened. "You moved the reserves before I asked," she said softly. He told her he'd read the geopolitical risk report she had discarded the day before. Instability in the region typically preceded cash-heavy demands. He wanted them to be ready. She whispered, "Good. You're learning." Then the red phone on his desk rang. Unlisted line. 5 people in the world had that number. The caller ID showed unknown. "It's Croft," Sarah said, her voice going cold. "Put it on speaker. I want to hear him beg." Croft's voice oozed through the line, rich, oily, already certain of his leverage. He said he wasn't calling for Sarah. He was calling for Ethan. He knew Ethan was on a leash, working off a debt he would never repay at minimum wage, humiliated by the ex-wife who had dismantled him. He had a lifeline. $5 million wired to a blind Singapore account within 10 minutes of receiving the encryption key to Sarah's private server. The geological surveys for the Bolivian sector. Freedom. His life back. The suits, the cars, the power. $5 million. The number hung in the air. Ethan looked at the phone. Then he looked at Sarah. He thought about the last 6 months, about the brutal 18-hour days and the things he had witnessed in this room. A woman fighting not for vanity, but for the survival of her family's legacy. The king of New York he used to be had been a hollow suit coasting on charm and someone else's invisible money. The man standing here now was broke and tired and useful. For the first time in his life, he was actually the thing he had always pretended to be. He leaned into the speakerphone. "You have a fundamental misunderstanding of the situation, Richard," he said. "You think I'm here because I have to be. But you can't buy loyalty you haven't earned. And frankly, you can't afford me." He paused. "Go to hell." He disconnected the call. The silence rushed back louder than before. Sarah let out a long, slow breath. She confirmed that she had known Croft was going to call. He was a predator. He'd assumed Ethan was the weak link. He'd assumed everyone had a price. Jameson had been monitoring the line from the security hub downstairs. If Ethan had typed one character of that password, he would have been in a federal holding cell by sunrise. It had been a test, the final test. She reached into her blazer and set a folded document on his keyboard. He picked it up. The debt agreement, all $4.2 million of it. Across the front, stamped in bold red ink, paid in full. His hands trembled. The math didn't add up, he said. She told him the math was irrelevant. He had just saved the company billions. Consider the debt settled. She told him he was free, legally, officially. He could take the Honda out of the garage and never come back. She would even write him a reference. Then she said, or he could stay, chief of staff. The salary would reflect his actual contribution. The hours would be brutal. The pressure would be constant. And she would never, not once, let him forget who sat in the big chair. But he would be part of something real. He would help build the future. Ethan looked at the exit sign glowing green in the darkness. The easy way out. Then he looked at the woman behind the desk, the woman he had mocked and underestimated and walked away from, who had broken him down to nothing just to show him how to build something worth having. He folded the paid-in-full document and put it in his pocket. He opened his laptop. "The Bolivian markets open in 3 hours and 45 minutes, Miss Winslow," he said quietly. "If we want to crush Croft, we need to restructure the bid before the opening bell." A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of Sarah's lips. Not affection, recognition. Game recognizing game. "Make the coffee," she said, pulling her tablet closer. "Black, 195 degrees. Coming right up." They weren't husband and wife anymore. They were something far more dangerous. They were a team. And as the sun began to rise over New York City, Ethan Caldwell realized that for the first time in his life, he was exactly where he belonged. Because for the first time in his life, he had actually earned his place there. Ethan thought he was signing away a boring housewife. He was actually signing away his own ego. And the woman he dismissed as mediocre? She'd been waiting, watching, building an empire in the margins of his arrogance. True power doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to sign the checks. What do you think? Did Ethan deserve the redemption Sarah gave him? Or should she have left him in the gutter where he ended up? Drop your take in the comments. I read every one. Hit like if this story delivered, subscribe so you never miss what's next, and I'll see you in the following one.